from my experience, when I speak to people, they'll often want to approach their separation based on cost. And everyone's very fearful around the cost. Yep. And so I always describe the lowest cost as being what we would call the kitchen table divorce. And you bringing up that, well, if you don't have any legal advice, you may not be getting the outcome that you need. Thinking about it in those contexts, there is more than one way to get a divorce. A responsible couple who wants to separate can choose to do it yourself. There's other options like hiring a mediator, choosing to collaborate, to litigate, or to self-represent. All have a lawyer, not all of them have a lawyer involved to the same extent. I think most couples also know what will work best for themselves because they're the most in touch with their marriage. They understand the dynamics, but they might not understand what process is the right fit for them. Can you just give us a broad overview from the most simplistic a separation agreement to the most complicated in terms of what processes there are? And maybe starting off with what we talked about, like the concept of a low-cost kitchen table agreement.
When you talk about sort of the different types of agreements, I think you really did sort of hit the nail on the head a little bit, was whatever works for the couple. I mean, if you have a couple that communicate well and know each other's finances well, or had lots of joint interactions on financial planning, that there's low conflict between them, they both understand, we're kind of going our separate ways, then, the kitchen table agreement can still be something that's done. Even saying that, they should still each get some independent legal advice. Again, just to know what those rights and obligations are. And the more that they can talk together, the more that they can work things out together. And maybe they go online and get a template. I'm not a big fan of online forms, but if they go online and get a template, at least they'll have an idea of what topics to cover. Do they talk about a pension? What happens to Canada pension plan credits? There's a lot of things that people may not understand or think about when it comes time to doing a separation agreement. And sadly, far too many times in my career, once or twice a year almost, I have someone, myself or a colleague I know, will have someone come into their office who tried working it out on their own and they just missed something. These could be critical pieces. One situation was someone who missed dividing their pension properly, and 12 years later was sort of like, oh, well, where's my share of your pension? And they're like, there's no share of your pension. We never dealt with it. And because they both didn't get independent legal advice. And unfortunately, that matter ended up being litigated by a colleague of mine, and the judges say, sorry, there's a time limit to dealing with this and you missed it. So there's an unfortunate situation where, $400 of legal advice might have saved putting $1,000 a month into the person's pocket for the rest of their life. I mean, the cost benefit analysis there for a little bit of advice would have been good.
Yeah, so how I would summarize that would be that a kitchen table agreement is mostly about a couple working out all of their issues together around a kitchen table, and then taking it to independent legal advice to have it reviewed and find out what areas they may or may not have missed. And then that would be a really productive way for some couples who have a lot that they agree upon and maybe not overly complex situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, and this happens a lot of times, especially in the practice that I run, is that people come to me and say, hey, we've sat down, and they come at least with an outline of what they're trying to settle on. I give the legal advice to one couple, and then the other party gets their own legal advice. And then really it's up to one of the lawyers to put together an agreement. It's actually a quite cost-effective way, because if the couple have already had the discussions, they've already talked about how to deal with some issues, children or finances, there's not much more for the lawyers to be involved in, and the less involvement of the lawyers, of course, that saves the cost. So through that, they can have that agreement again. They get an agreement that's in writing, has independent legal advice, full financial disclosure. They can sign it, and again, the more they've cooperated, the more chance they'll put it in a drawer and forget about it.
Thank you. Super helpful.